a lot of times you hear a pitch, it just grabs your attention. And these stories, they have a heart. It's just very readily apparent. There isn't any ambiguity. It's like, I got to find out more about this story.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vela-Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vela-Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vela-Williamson. This season, our focus is on passing the mic. Today, I'm joined by Vincent T. Davis. Award-winning Express News columnist and feature writer Vincent T. Davis has been telling human interest stories for the paper since 1998. We've worked on stories together about nonprofits, animals, seniors, and unsung heroes since 2005. His feel-good, heartwarming stories shine a light on extraordinary people in his coverage area. Welcome, Vince.
Hey, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm excited to officially chat with you in this medium because you and I have been talking both as professionals and as friends for many, many years here. So tell our listeners all about yourself. Tell us about your background and what your work is like today.
Well, so I came to journalism after spending 22 years in the Air Force, retired here in San Antonio in 1997, got involved with journalism through the Ranger student newspaper at San Antonio College, met some contacts at the San Antonio Express News and started there as an editorial assistant, worked my way up to a freelance writer, and in 2003 became a reporter.
And what I like to say is he's one of the very few people who really focuses on good news.
Yeah.
Vince, that's something we've talked about a long time. And how did you come to start really focusing on more of these heartwarming stories?
Well, I started out like everyone else writing obituaries and on the crime beat, but I was really captivated by the reporters who wrote feature stories. And most of the feature stories, always delved into the lives or, profiles of people who often don't get a lot of notice. They just go about their lives doing things they wouldn't consider extraordinary. But I found while I was out covering stories, running into these folks and really just wanted to know more about them and share their stories with our readers. My editors noticed that and they kind of gave me the free rein to go out and actually find stories, go out on the streets for hours and just talk to people about their lives. So I've been very fortunate in that respect. So that's kind of what led me to the editors allowing me to have a column, where I speak to everyday people who live in and around San Antonio.
Yeah, his column is called San Antonio Stories, and currently it runs Mondays. And so I think that's a great way to start the week, right? A lot of people are like, oh, it's Monday. But I like your column because it's definitely a pick-me-up about the good people do and the extraordinary efforts they make, whether they realize that or not. But you also do general assignments reporting. So what's going on in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're featured as a pass the mic voice in my book, Smart Talk, at the end of chapter 3, which is titled Media Relations, Do's and Don'ts. And there you share how to identify a good PR source, which is kind of the gold standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us how you determine when a PR pro is a good source or not. What have you learned about that?
I've been pretty fortunate, I think, that most of the PR pros that I work with, they know or try to understand what pitches are appropriate for the reporter they're working with. And well, you were one of the first, and you kind of set the standard that, whenever I would work with you, I never had to ask for information or details because everything was there. Whatever you sent to me or emailed to me, everything I needed was there. Phone numbers, sources, times, dates, which just made my job easier. And I really appreciate that. And the other thing was timeliness. If there was an event coming up February 14th, you wouldn't send it February 12th or February 13th. You would always send it a good 2 weeks ahead of time. And then we would work together as far as availability of photos or if something changed. So working with someone who was able to pivot when needed has always been a plus.
Vince, what I'm hearing you say too, because those are great points, and I appreciate the kudos, of course, but we as PR pros, to be a good source, should have our details ready and share that via email, offer it up front, try to anticipate what the journalist may need. So that way you're not having to do double work of asking us for this and that after the fact.
Yep.
And then give you some lead time and some different angles to work with. Does that sound like a good summary?
Yes, most definitely.
Okay, great. So that sounds like some of the bad ways that PR pros may really need to up their game is not being timely and not giving you all the information. But are there any other ways that PR pros could do a better job of working with journalists?
Most definitely. Probably the top thing is to make sure that the PR pro is pitching the right pitch to the right reporter. Often I'll get pitches about things that aren't even remotely close to what I cover. And it's a lot of it from around the country. I just kind of flummoxed by that sometimes because that's the bulk of emails about wineries and wrestling matches that don't fall under my coverage,
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's another great tip that you're sharing is do your research if you want to try to work with a journalist or a reporter and actually identify what is their beat. I talk about my book about some reporters have a subject matter beat, like a category, right? Like they do arts and culture or they do technology, and others have a location beat. And sometimes the intersection is there too. So, Vince Davis writes about human interest stories that center on people based in San Antonio. So if you're pitching him out of market about something, particularly that's out of market too, like you're way off. And a lot of pros try to use AI, artificial intelligence, and they try to use Cision or all kinds of cool, fancy tools to do the pitching for them, make it easier. But honestly, this is public relations work. This is working with people, and journalists should be our allies. And we have to do that extra step of actually going pro to pro. Are they a fit for this opportunity or not?
Most definitely.
So you just mentioned you get a lot of kind of spammy email pitches. What does that really look like and how you manage reviewing all the email pitches you get in as a reporter?
I guess, over time here, I've developed relationships with several people that are kind of go-to sources. So if I see their name, I'll stop instead of scanning real quick. I'll stop and, check out what they're pitching. So that's always helped me out a lot, is developing those relationships. And I know that's something we'll probably talk about, but that helps me to separate things that I may be interested in and spending some time in and maybe contacting them to see, exactly if this is something that we can move forward on. So that's what I do in the mornings, is try to do that throughout the day and make a list of things to follow up on. So that's been what's helped me out for many years.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note that it really is about the relationships. Like in the book, I have a chapter about the relationships you need to be successful. But I'll tell you, I still work with, as I'm like mentoring aspiring PR pros, and it doesn't matter their age or anything. One of the things I keep saying is you need to go make friends with the journalists. You need to go to their events. You need to go to their mixers. You need to support their galas. You need to volunteer on their boards where they'll let you support and mix in with them. Because if they know you by name, like I did a Twitter poll before I wrote the book because I wanted to see, okay, is it really the source? Is it the name of the person you get the email from? Or is it the actual, sexy subject title, right? And by and large, it was the source. If they know you and they know you as a reputable source, a trustworthy source that has good ideas and good connections, they're more likely to email it. That's what journalists say. And really, that's been my experience. But I think as a pro who's trying to mentor others and teach them the way of media relations, I'm like, you need to go make these relationships yourself, because there will be a time where I sunset my media relations pitching
Mhm.
And those relationships go with me. So you need to get to know Vince Davis. You need to get to know the different reporters and editors out there so that they can understand when they see your email coming that maybe I should open it.
Yeah, someone who's starting out, a journalist or a PR person, I don't know. It just seems like we're in this field of communication. And so sort of like the go-to for between us is to go out for coffee or just check in every so often, even if you're not pitching something, especially if we're going to be working on something in the long term or you think you may be. I mean, it's not to try to start a personal relationship, but this person's like, oh, I don't have anything right now, but I heard something's coming up down the road. And then they may make a notation of it or note that. But then they also know that building some type of work relationship, this person can figure out, okay, this is my go-to person. I'm looking for this. Breaking news just happened. And this person has access to people I can talk to. Well, it's a lot easier to call that person, text or email and say, hey, I got a deadline and in about 2 hours. Can you help me out? And they come through like you have in the past,
You've given me some good challenges, which, keeps my brain growing. I tell you what.
Well, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast, but I can recall calling you about some things that were nowhere near in your wheelhouse, what you were working on, but you found me a source. And that's when I knew, okay, I know that Melissa may know someone in the airplane industry. So she may know.
Yeah. There was that Las Vegas shooting.
Yes, that's what I was thinking about. The editor put out a newsroom-wide email for us to try and find someone connected to that incident. And I remember I called you and you said, let me get back to you. And I just said, I think I might know someone. And it wasn't 30, 45 minutes later, you had me in contact with this woman from San Antonio who was actually trying to flee the event with her son.
Yeah.
And I called her, got the information, and everybody at work was like, what, how? But that's all kudos to you.
Yeah, no, that's really important. I think with that, obviously, I don't work with clients related to a lot of those instances that unfortunately happen. But anytime I can help you or help reporters, I just find it's an investment. It's a friendship investment. It's a relationship investment, but also for the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we do connect with stories more intimately when it's someone relatable. And a lot of times that is someone that's local, someone that's more likely to be like you. And so sometimes what I do love about working with you, especially with these human interest focus you certainly seem to have, is that you give people opportunities to share their stories that they may have never had before and they may never have again. And for that woman, it was a good way to kind of process and share that experience that, maybe would help others in the future, or at least be maybe cathartic for them. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, if we all as PR pros and communicators and all types of people end up working in media relations, if you can take that moment to say, it's not on my roster, but let me see what I can do. And you send out that message to colleagues. Or for me, a lot of times I just crowdsource on social media. I'm like, hey, does anyone know someone that does this or that?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's honestly just fun to hunt and do something different than your day-to-day work or day-to-day client roster. So thanks for those opportunities. But yeah, it's absolutely an investment. And I want to make sure everyone understands that you need to be of service and you need to serve to really work through the stereotype that journalists and PR pros are at odds. We should not be at odds. We should be working together and telling great stories. And so this is a great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
And on the human interest front, Vince, can you tell our listeners what makes a great human interest profile or story? What are you looking for?
You can attest to this because we'll be talking and you may share several different ideas of things that are coming up on your calendar. And midway through, I'll hear something and it'll jump out. What you've said about this person or this situation jumps out and it stops me. And so It's sort of like when you're out trying to look for a story. And we used to go out driving around town for hours. Sometimes it just take an hour. You go out, you see something, you stop, and you're like, why are you doing this? Why is this homeless man taking the food that's been given to him by the church and taking it and feeding the animals in the park? That's a story. That's a story we found about 2 blocks from the paper years ago. It just piques your curiosity, like, what is that? And so when you ask that question, that kind of opens up things. But a lot of times you hear a pitch, it just grabs your attention. And these stories, they have a heart. It's just very readily apparent. There isn't any ambiguity. It's like, I got to find out more about this story. So whenever I'm out and about, or when I hear someone say something, I've stopped you and I'm always picking your brain, and you'll go through that you know about, or stories that you've heard, or people you know, and then you come in that one. I think it was like I was looking for a Fiesta story, and you told me about the Fiesta King.
Yeah, it was a gentleman from St. Mary's, and he totally lived Fiesta, which if you're not from San Antonio, this is the biggest nonprofit and cause fundraiser in the city. And it's 11 days of fundraising, but all types of different parties that for good, right?
Right.
It's a lot of fun. And this gentleman just was hardcore. And so it happens every year. So that's another criteria is timeliness, right? And so as journalists, you're looking for what is a different type of story we can tell about that. Fiesta is interesting because we always have to go back through the history for those who are new to the market. And even us who've been here who forget, why do we do this? But then you're also looking for the different people who make it possible, the people who sew the Fiesta Queen dresses and the fundraisers. So I think that's really important. And recently you did a column about the lady who years ago started giving out water during the MLK March.
Yes.
I was like, perfect. Yeah. Perfect for Vince. What a find that he's looking for the different person to spotlight there. And that's what passing the mic is about. So I love that you do that in your work. And I think as PR pros, we can be thinking through not only the typical things about our organizations, but what are the people stories? And for you, it's innate, but I'll tell you listeners, I know Vince very well. It's almost like when you're a musician, you hear the right chord and you get those goosebumps. I can see that visceral reaction in you, Vince, or I can hear it sometimes. And I know it too. I know, oh, that's a good story, or this person's going to be a great storyteller. And so what you're really looking for is there something unique or different or novel about that person, whether they're the longest tenured employee. In fact, I talked to a nonprofit, they have an employee who's still going super strong in his 80s, and he's been there since the beginning. Those often lead to really interesting conversations. So look for the people that are seemingly ordinary, who are doing something extraordinary, typically to help other people. And, those are the human interest stories you see. Those are the ones you see also they bubble up to the AP Wire. They bubble up to Good Morning America. And I think that's great. We need to tell more of those good news stories because that really helps counter some of the other things that are out there.
Yeah, it may sound hokey, but these stories have heart. It's like this pulsing beat that readers can identify with. And so often we'll go up to people and the things that they're doing, the things they've done, they will look at you and go why would anybody be interested in hearing that? Because like you say, they don't think anything they've done is extraordinary, not that it is. But I just relish having the opportunity to go out and tell stories of people who probably would never be in the paper or haven't been in the paper, would ever do anything bombastic or crazy or corrupt, like them get headlines.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that we can share stories and find out we're not so different. We're more alike than we are different because we all have different experiences.
Right.
And my editors, I have to give a shout out to my editors who gave me this opportunity to go out to find these stories. Just an aside, the story about the woman who hands out bottles at the MLK March was just an email from her daughter-in-law. She just posted it and she sent it to the city desk and myself. And as soon as I saw it, I was emailing as quick as I could.
You knew, you got the goosebumps. That's smart. And that's a great point. Everyone should really look for those good stories to tell and, honor your mother when you can. And I think that's fabulous. So, well, Vince, I'm going to let you get back to your writing. But before you go, I like to ask all my guests this because I'm very intrigued by the different answers I get.
Mm-hmm.
What does smart talk mean to you?
Smart talk is real talk. Doing what we do, understanding each other's jobs and being transparent, I think is probably half the battle. And knowing the lines that neither of us can cross makes the working relationship, I think, better for both parties. And then a bonus is if you are able to establish a relationship like we have. You are one of my go-to people, personally, professionally. And that was a bonus from us working together. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, friend. That's real talk because I don't think you can have that real trusting relationship without that honesty. But to your point, there are boundaries and there are professional nuances people should know. So if you are not an experienced media relations professional that is doing things in a positive way, or, maybe you've gotten some feedback, definitely check out the book on that chapter because I certainly wag my finger and say, this is how we should be doing it with those boundaries in mind, right?
Yes.
So Vince, this was so fun. And I know people will probably have great story ideas for you and want to connect with you. What is the best way for our listeners to connect?
So they can connect with me probably by email. And that is at vtdavis@express-news.net.
Thank you, Vince, for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Oh, no. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. We love diving deep into communication topics to elevate our industry practice. If you'd like to go deeper, you can work with me as a trainer, consultant, or hire my firm for strategic communication planning or PR strategy services. And in case you missed it, Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know is out. You can buy your copy to get my advice, tips, and tools about all things public relations. Available on Amazon or get your autographed copy at mvw360.com/book. If you've already got your copy, please leave us a review on Amazon. It would mean the world to us and helps more aspiring pros find the book. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.